Alright, so here we are back. I've got my helmet all set up. I've done an unwrap. I actually cut one of these things off, and I'll talk about that in a minute, just to clean it up because it was a nightmare. I would just really, if I was making this for a game or for purposes of putting up online for my own portfolio or something, I would have just spent the time and made sure I did this right inside of ZBrush, and then when I came back out here. So you guys need to be doing that, is the point. You all. Alright, so here we are. It's unwrapped. It's symmetried. I'm going to go ahead and collapse it down to editable poly. And then I'm going to go ahead and export it. So for me, it's Control-Shift-E, just like exporting out of Substance Painter. So I'm going to take it out, and I'm going to go Test Helm, for me, low class, max. I always put max after the end of it because if I name them as I go in and out, then I can tell. Like you'll see this one doesn't have a name. That means that's the first one. It's just my naming method, as long as you have a naming method that works for you. But just you want to know between the two programs which ones was which. So I'll say save. And say OK and replace it. And then I'm not even going to mess with the settings. They should be good for yours too by default. And then I'm going to come into ZBrush, and then I'm going to say, and again, the reason I do this is to make sure that everything is the same scale. Plus, if I want, I can do a real quick project on top of it, and we'll talk about that in a second. So I'm going to come into ZBrush, I'm going to grab an empty object and just say, come over to my Z plugins and say import, and then I'm going to come find that thing we just found. And we'll bring it in here, and we'll take a look at it, and it's all tried up and stuff, so I'm not real crazy about that, but here's the thing. Everything that you go out of ZBrush into Max, or out of ZBrush, is just for getting the textures. This is unwrapped like my final model. The high-res one is what I'm going to use for my final bake. So I don't really care if it's tries or if it's got a couple of things that are off. All that matters is all the polys that are being used are in my final model are unwrapped in here too. So I have my high-res, I have my low res, and it tried it up, and I probably did something in the settings. Yours shouldn't do this. I'll take a look at it later. But just so you know, the only purpose of having these two models in one place is for getting them out to get to substance for the painting. Now that it's unwrapped and they match the final version. That's the other reason that I don't scale this up when I'm working on it in here until after I'm done modifying it to bring it back into ZBrush. Because if we look at the scale right now, we see it's tiny, 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 tiny. So for me, let's say it's a head and a character is 7 feet tall, or I'm sorry, 6 feet tall, 7 heads tall. So, you know, if I go and make a box to match the size, then I just scale this up. And we'll get back to that when we get to our final export for Unity. Alright, so here we are. We've got our head, we've got our low res. We come over here and look, and we have some of our high reses here, and this is not one we want. Okay, this is one I've done a decimation on just to see, and you can see it's 16K. We were just testing it out, so I'm going to delete this one just to get it out of the way, so we don't have any confusion. Then we can come over to this one, and this is, if we turn everything back on, the head there, is kind of the final version, but let's take a look at this. You see how this has a color, and this has a color, and 2 colors, and this has colors? This is what we want. If I come to 16, oh, that's a different one. Sorry. If I come to if I come to this one, this is the exported we put out. This is not the one we just brought it back in. We can tell by the weirdness there. So I'm going to delete this one too, just to make sure I don't make the same mistake. And if I have saved files of my ZBrush, then it doesn't matter if I delete stuff from this file because I have a backup. So come back to here. That's fine. That works pretty good. I'm going to go back to my high res. Now I don't want to import it into here necessarily, but I'm trying to think of the best way to do this. Let's talk about these colors here. I'm going to leave my polygroups separated like they are. This is kind of important. Let me turn off the line fill here and we'll just see. This allows me inside of Substance Painter to have each one of these things have their own material map, we haven't used it before, but there's an ID channel inside of Substance that we can use to make sure that we're only painting on this part of the map or only painting on this part of the map. Okay, I broke up the unwrap a little bit, so this is separated out, but most of this other stuff is all one piece. So I'm trying to make you understand that you don't have to have 20 pieces as separate imports to be able to get to this. Now, since Substance Painter is going to have everything you have unwrapped, everything you paint in the texture on one texture plane, it means it's going to be less resolution than if I had these all as separate pieces. But that's sometimes what you need to do, and you know, as much as we want to make it perfect, when the head is this big, it won't really matter. Okay, so I'll come back in here and I will say, just for the testing sake, now what I mean by this is, just for the projection sake, is I'm going to take this and I'm just going to go merge visible like that. Okay. You know what? I'll even put, well, for right now I won't. So I'll come back to merged, and you can see they all have separate colors. If I decimate this, it will take the colors away. If I do a Dynamesh on it, it will keep them the same. But for now, this is all I need. I need is one big piece. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my low res and insert it into here. So I'll go insert, and I'll come over to high, which is the bad name, and I'm going to come over right now real quick and just say rename and say low and underscore max, just so we know. Okay, actually, you know what, let me undo that. Rename. No, that's fine, actually. Okay, so, and I'm going to move this above it. So I'm going to use this little arrow and move it above in the layers like that. In this new version, you can just move them, but in 2018, you can't. So I'm pretty sure. So I'm going to take a look at this, and I'm going to see that there's some places that it doesn't quite overlap correctly, right? And of course, we have the problem with the next stuff. And let me show you what you're going to do. You're going to come in here, you're going to come over to project, and what project does is it will take the the layer below and try and project it to the layer above. So the form, it'll try and form the positions of all these verts to match the positions of all those verts. And interestingly, okay. So I'm going to leave it at 0.02 because it might be enough, but you may have to mess with that number. The higher it is, the further it'll project the picture outside, or the cage outside, to make sure it matches. If I do this, and then we take a look at it again, it's a subtle difference, and don't worry about the jaggies. It's a subtle difference, okay? But, if we undo, it's a subtle difference, but sometimes that subtle difference really makes the difference in the way the unwrap works. Now, sometimes I don't like it, but you know what? We'll try it this way. See, look at this. I don't like that. I'm gonna pull that back out. So, you know, that's the kind of thing you have to decide when you get it in here. Sometimes you have to do it just to get it right. And let's see what it did actually to. Did you just do it? I think, yeah. I don't know why sometimes it does this scale thing. ZBrush. Ah, you wonderful, wonderful thing. All right, so I'm going to delete this version real quick. And I'm just going to insert the one I imported in a second ago. So you get to see me have the same problems as you. Move this up. This down. Okay, so it should still be fine inside of Substance. It just means that we may have to come back in here and decide how we want to do it. I could mask stuff out and then project and see if that works too, but let's just go for it right now. Let's just see what we get. And this is kind of what you're going to be doing. This is all the stuff we've done so far is the fun stuff. Then we're going to get out of here and go to the harder stuff. Like, I don't have the beard pulled out. I meant to pull that out. We can pull that out later too. And that's not a hard thing to add in. So anyway, let's do this. Let's export this back out of here. So we're going to come over here, go export. Check my options real quick. Yeah, export. And I'm going to say low, and we'll call this Z fine fin like that. And I'm going to come down to this one. and I'm going to say export. But before I export this one, let me hide my low res here. Before I export this one, I want to do one more thing in here. I want to change this so it says export polygroups as mats. Just like that. It's going to export these polygroups as material IDs, basically. So I'm going to export right here. And this one will be hi. And there is some other stuff you can do inside of Substance and set these files so the naming convention works and everything like that. But I'm not going to worry about that right now. Oh, you know what? I just realized I did something else too. Let me go back and rename my hi here. Let me rename everything. I was a bad melon. Okay. Helmet underscore hi. Hi. And this one will be helmet underscore low. Again, all we're working on these pieces for is to get the textures out of Substance 4. So export. I'll come do it again, low Z right there. But now my mesh is named correctly. I'll go down to the next one. I'll turn this polygroups as mats back off. It didn't really matter if I left it on when I exported the other one because I didn't have any polygroups and we're not using it to bake from, but that's fine. Exports, hi, save, go. And it takes a second to export these. I'm going to come back into Max, Z, save real quick, close this sucker up because I'm going to open up Substance and we all know that's a hog. Okay, it exported fine. I'm going to save this one. 31. You can see how many times I save things because I trust ZBrush and Max explicitly. I'm going to leave this open just in case I need to re-export real quick. But then I'll open up Substance Painter